having I was used to having TAs and EAs assist with classroom management and behavior, but never with facilitating learning like we do at LSS with our volunteers. So I chose to focus on the best use and to better understand the role of volunteers in an adult learning classroom. Some of the research I did turned me to one book that I read was called A New Wave of Evidence, which was about the effects of community, family, and volunteers in public school classrooms. So this was still about children, but I think a lot of this is applicable to teaching adults. So what I've come to better understand is one, how to involve volunteers, but not just that, also the effect that they have on student success and their attitude towards learning. Now, I have a short PowerPoint. It's not loaded with text. It's more to help me. Uh, keep track of myself. One moment, please. That's not it. Okay. So kind of how I've come to understand using volunteers is a way to fill in the gap between the teacher and the students. So what some of the research says is that volunteers are a significant resource. They're supportive, they're welcoming, they're members of the community. Teaching assistants are also employees. Volunteers serve as an outreach from someone in the community to the students. They're doing this out of their own goodwill and the joy that it brings them. Students see this, and what they see is other community members taking education seriously and promoting an overall positive attitude. Now, what I've taken from this research and from my experience is volunteers have what I would call active and passive roles in the classroom. And the way I understand it so far, active roles are engaging with the students, facilitating conversation. They offer input to us as teachers. Something that's been very useful and important to me is the feedback that they've given me. Coming into some of these classes, I've found that my volunteers know the students better than I do. Been working with them longer. And in many cases, they work one-on-one with certain students more than I do. Over the last month, we've had a huge influx of students, and the volunteers have been useful in supporting those new students. Something that when I come into a classroom with almost 30 students, it's hard to interact with them one-on-one. The volunteer has all class to move around and drift around from student to student and offer them support and make them feel welcome. Now, what I found most interesting from what I've read is the passive roles that volunteers have. One thing that I've noticed in my oral classes is that my students tend to be more active and outgoing with a volunteer present. When there are substitutes or when I'm absent, the volunteer is a familiar face. And something that was, of course, I think we're all reluctant to accept at first, but it's teacher accountability. Volunteers hold us accountable. They keep us on track. It's more of a motivator to write detailed lesson plans, to come up with new ideas, to prevent things from becoming too routine. I'm just looking at my notes here. And how I have been attempting and succeeding in a lot of ways to implement what I've been learning. First and foremost is setting clear roles. Who is the volunteer and what are they going to do in the classroom? Maximizing their effectiveness. And part of that is, like, you learn your students' strengths, learning your volunteers' strengths. I have a volunteer who is very good at working one-on-one with students who need assistance, who need a little extra work. I have an oral student. She speaks beautifully, very fluent, but she struggles with literacy. And one of the roles that this volunteer excels at is aiding those students with understanding the written parts of the lesson. Fostering collaboration with volunteers as well. I try to meet with my volunteers before class and after class. Talk with them. What have you seen? What do you notice? Because you are seeing things that I am not. And then discussing strategies with them and hopefully, implementing that into class. With literacy, my volunteer mentioned that there were quite a few students who are struggling with spelling. What have you seen? I asked her, what have you seen other teachers doing? She gave me some ideas and we've been regularly implementing that into class. Spelling tests and drills and so on. And then, of course, just recognizing contributions. I always try, I say always, I always at the end of class thank them. I appreciate it. There are some days when I might have I'd be fine on my own, but there are some days where I cannot imagine having class without my volunteers. And they are very valuable to me and everyone. All right, that's all I got.
Thank you, Alec. I really appreciated that distinction between active and passive roles. That's a really insightful lens for which to more fully consider the impact and influence and importance of our volunteers. Thank you for that. Laura,
You're welcome.
comments?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for doing that research, Alec, and for putting that intentionality into that part of your teaching, how to effectively work with your volunteers. And thank you for starting us off today. Does anybody else have comments or questions for Alec?
I just want to, this is so timely, Alec, because we just had a conversation among our staff today about how some teachers are really utilizing volunteers to their fullest potential and how much it actually helps them to be a better teacher. And so it was really interesting for you, that be your first thing, like, oh my gosh, this is our conversation this morning and what's our next step? So thank you.
You're welcome.
I think there's really an art to how we effectively work with volunteers, and they're just as varied as the students that we work with. So they bring different talents and preferences to the classroom. We have a comment from Nikita. Thanks, Nikita, for sharing your thoughts here. Trying to see what you said. Yeah. She found the passive role interesting too. We have a couple new volunteers figuring out how to best use them in an online class. Alec, is there anything you want to add about volunteer use in online classes? Because I know you teach both in person and online.
I don't have many online volunteers. When they do come, I like to pair them off with, because in our online classes, we have fewer levels. So we have there's a wider range of students in an online class. They're very helpful in taking some of the lower students into a breakout room and getting them ready to join the main class. I have a couple students, an older couple from Ukraine, where they spent time with a volunteer for about a month, and now they spend all class with me and everyone else. She got them up to speed so they can participate in class.
Thank you very much, Alec.
All right.
Thank you for sharing your work and research on volunteer use.
Very
Are
welcome.
we, yeah. Are we ready for our next presenter today, too?
Hello. All right. Um, can everybody hear me okay?
Here you will.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So my topic is about how to engage higher level students in your class. And I have a small presentation for us to share. Okay. So, share. So for me, the situation happened recently because I had one or two, sometimes three students in my class that when I saw them, I felt like, oh, they're doing something else instead of listening to me. So I figure out why and I did some research to that. So how to get them back on the track, like listening to the teachers, practicing English. So for me, why does why does the disengagement happen? The students are waiting to be tested to the next level. It means that for that level, they understand the lessons very well and they're ready to move on. So they are getting like, oh, I know it. And some students who review and practice English at home every day, and that helps the student get better at English like every day. And when they come to class, they're like, oh, I might learn this at home. So it happens to, and students who are non-SLAE and they have education backgrounds. Sometimes they are fast learner, they learn English very fast. Okay, and some students who are tested at a higher end of the class, it means that they have the knowledge of that level, but is not yet to go to the next level. But comparing to other students in the classroom, they are still better, which led to they might get distracted or feel bored while they're in class, and the teacher can see it. They will show you things like playing with my phone, or I talk with my partner next to me in the language, not in English, not about a lesson. So these are the things that I saw my students do in the class. And how to get their attention back. I did research at the Literacy Minnesota. So it said that challenge the higher level students. So the teachers ask students to do more things. For example, like when they answer something, the teachers can ask them, why do you say that? Or when they speak, teachers can help them add things into their speaking or writing, like adjective, adverbs, or grammars. And teachers purposely makes mistake. So teachers can say something wrong to see, does the students know that, oh, that is not like good English, that they need to practice more to have better English. And one more thing about University of Connecticut, that is Joseph Rensley, that is give opportunities for collaborations, means that we can pair up high level students together, and then teachers can give a more challenging task to that group. So they have to use their English more, they have to think more, and that will lead to tier assignment. It means that when making lesson plans, teachers can think, oh, I have some good students in my class. What can I do? What can I upgrade their knowledge? What can I do to upgrade their knowledge in that lesson instead of just in the packets? And what I did in the situation is, yes, I created a specific task for them when they're doing pair work. For example, like oral focus lesson, when they practice in pair, I added things like grammar, intonation, or reductions in speaking to help their English better, more fluently and more naturally, and which also a challenge for them. So a challenge for them. And for Let's Focus lesson, when the students read the story in pair, the higher level students, they need to read with fluency, not just words. And sometimes when they practice writing, for normal students, not like normal, but yeah, the lower level students, they write one sentence, but the higher level ones, they need to write 2 to 3 sentences using things like because, or and, or but. So that challenged them, and that will help me create, challenging atmosphere for them to compete with each other when they're in group. And I also use them as an EA in my class. I don't have volunteer, so I will use them as an EA. when we do conversation practice. So I will let the higher level students practice with me to show other students how the conversation flows. And how did that help me and how did the students respond? They feel like they are shining. They are the center of the attention. They have they can achieve more in learning English journey because the teachers are giving them more things to do, better English, and also they, as I said, they have more attention to the from the teachers. I believe students like that feeling when they have more attention from the teacher in a good way. So that helps me get the student back on the track. They focus back on the lessons and they don't feel bored or play with the phone because they know that, oh, I have something new for them to do and they need to be prepared. And yes, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much you had some positive comments about the students shine and people really liked that image of the students shining as one of the outcomes. Everybody, you are welcome to give to a hand. Congratulations and thank you for sharing with us your action research too.
And I
Any
can also give the link to the research that I read after the speech.
Does anyone have comments or questions for Tu on this project that he did on how to engage the higher level students in an ESL class?
You know, this is really in the weeds, but I'd be curious, do you verbally, and maybe it depends on whether it's a lit class or a C class, but do you just verbally tell the students, I need 2 or 3 cents from you? Is that part of the expectation that you set with those students privately, or does it happen more organically, naturally?
Yeah, usually I will do it privately when they are in the pair work. So it helps me that other students don't feel like, oh, they are lower than the others. So, but the higher ones know that they are higher because I'm giving them more tasks to do. And also, I want to give credit to teacher Laura and Diana. They helped me with like when we give them more tasks to do. So remember to come back to test them to see if they actually can get it. And if it's very difficult, and then we lower the difficulties of the task. So it's not too hard for them, but it would be enough for the higher level students.
Yeah, I think that's a key point. The crux there is challenging enough that it pushes them forward, but not so difficult that it's defeating or counterproductive. So, and that's really that art and science in the classroom and that you hone in and craft every day. So well done. Thank you.
Heather, do you
might-
have, I see your hand raised. Did you have a question or comment? If not, we'll go to Amy. I think she's ready to share.
Yeah, didn't mean to cut anyone off, but I just thought I would add to that, as Tu was saying, extra tasks for the high level students. We've been trying to incorporate that in some of our materials, our class materials packets, especially in the oral class that I'm involved with, which is oral 3, intermediate level. We've been trying to get either sort of 2 different levels of tasks for particular topics, or including extra pages with sort of extension activities. So if we have say, a higher pair of students or a higher student, they'll finish the task relatively quickly, and then we have an extra page that we can just say, oh, turn it over to this page. You tried this one with another student, just so that they have something to do. So trying to incorporate that into our little books, our materials, month by month, keep tweaking to add those kinds of activities, just so that the teacher has materials right there ready to go if the situation arises.
I'm also thinking in terms of pairing to know your students. Some students absolutely have that heart where they can work with that lower level student and take on that teacher role. Some students, no. They look at me and they're like, are you kidding me, girl? This is your job. Come on. So just to know the students you're dealing with and what their personalities are and what they like.
Yeah, I think John said it well, the art and the science. It's not a clear cut. There's not just one way to work with volunteers. There's not just one way to assist students that are needing differentiation in class. And I want to applaud John for his question about how we approach those higher level students. In I hear that there are teachers that are having those side conversations with the higher level students to let them know, hey, I see that you are very skilled. You're doing really well. I'm really proud of what you're doing. Teachers are talking to the students about their goals and the students' goals, and that our aim is to help them progress to a more advanced level. And so teachers, I'm hearing that people are having those conversations on the side to let them know that I see you and I hear you, and I'm going to be giving you some extra challenges here. So I know some of the teachers are doing that really explicitly.
And
At
as an
MSS.
ancillary support to that, you know, as we look toward the new assessments and implementation thereof, it's my understanding with the Best Plus 3.0, we're not necessarily beholden to 60 hours of instruction anymore. So hopefully that'll afford you more latitude and professional discretion at the classroom to, and I know you have your local recognition, skills checklists, etc. But hopefully it'll give you more latitude to move those students along as their skills and time, you know, at home and in class and goals permit.
That's correct. As John mentioned, that the new assessment for many of our ESL students in South Dakota, in the future, they will be able to be pre and post tested with the Best Plus 3.0. And that assessment, the publisher's recommendation is 40 hours of instruction rather than 60. So I know some of us are really excited about that because we already have students that make progress sooner than 60 hours. So we may be able to evidence more measurable skill gains in the area of educational functioning level through quicker assessments. I think, Heather, you did unmute at one point. Do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I was trying to clap for 2, but I hit the wrong button.
That happens. Anyone else thoughts on that topic of higher level students? How many in this group have had that challenge of their students at a slower pace, students at a faster pace, and what do I do? Yeah, okay. LSS, yes. Other programs, no. Congratulations, other programs.
I would think every one of my programs should all be raising their hands because they complain about it.
Well, we've talked over. Well, I appreciate your candor, and I can see how most classes probably do have that dynamic to them. We've been talking over the past year and more about the journey to retention and journey to enrollment. And one of the things that came for our team in Sioux Falls was the challenge of retaining students that are on that higher end that might not feel like it's meeting their needs without really strategic differentiation on our part. And even last week, I had a conversation with someone who got feedback from some Ukrainian students of ours, and there was a student who no longer participates in our program because what they really wanted was to understand every single word that was presented in the class, and that's not something that we were offering for them. So we've had those discussions too of how do we meet different learning styles in the classroom and let people know why we're doing what we're doing. One of the encouragements that I've given to and other teachers is Ukrainians in particular want to translate every single word on the page. So why not let them do that before class or after class? Tell them exactly what our assignment is going to be for the next day, and let them just knock themselves out with their phone translation, their Google Translate, and mark it up and create a glossary for themselves. So when they come to class, they're like, okay, yes, I looked up all of these words that the teacher is saying, and I feel really good about this. Instead of that discomfort of they're not getting all that translation and they stop coming, and that affects our retention as a program. So it really requires us to be creative about that art. Have any others had issues or strategies you've tried with that? Kim, what are your thoughts?
I just was thinking, based on the curriculum that a lot of the teachers use, at least their core curriculum, understandably, all teachers diversify their curriculum, but a lot of them have vocabulary lists associated with them. So maybe the idea that it wouldn't have to be asking the teacher to do a lot more, because sometimes we can't customize for every single student when we have so many students and so many classes and so many responsibilities, and our teachers, I think, sometimes start feeling bad because they're not meeting one person's expectation. But maybe, so I always think like maybe dive into the curriculum you're already using, see what vocabulary is there, and give them that in hopes to help move them along until they can adapt to a different learning style. Because obviously they're very strongly attached to that particular learning style. We've seen people from different countries over all the years where like have a particular learning style. Some groups, it's like, wow, you talk to them and you're like, they don't need us. And then you're like, whoa, they can't read and write, or something else, they don't like this or they like that, or just what they've been used to. And we all know as we've become more educated and our learning style probably becomes more diverse, we're not so dependent on an auditory or a kinesthetic or whatever they happen to be used to, because we know we just have to adapt because we've had so much more opportunities to be educated. But don't beat yourselves up as teachers, because you absolutely can't meet every student's learning style every single day.
And I'm just delighted and always perpetually humbled and so proud to be working with all of you. You're such thoughtful teachers, leaders, mentors, facilitating safe, welcoming classroom environments. I do think we're touching on some of those intersections of, like Tu was mentioning SLIFE students and those with limited or interrupted formal education. Maybe actually were born or raised in a refugee camp and is pre-literate in their own native tongue, all the way to graduate degree, doctoral possessing secondary migrants or immigrants who have, these diverse and experienced backgrounds, where they intersect then too with cultural considerations, maybe religious, maybe there's some gender, sex considerations with age, and so it's just so exciting to be part of it, at least peripherally. Thank you.
And humbling to hear your guys' presentations. that you think about this so intensely. It's very humbling.
Yeah, we appreciate you two putting the time and thought into this and sharing it with all of us, because it touches all of our students and programs. So we really appreciate you. Kate, you had your hand up. Did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, just piggybacking off Kim's vocabulary list idea, just wanted to share something I've done in the past. Is just a simple 3-column grid. First column has the word in English. Second column has a space for them to make notes, either in English or their language. And then the third column is they can translate the word into their language. And I found that to be helpful in the past.
Kate, I've even asked those really high students if they needed a challenge to add a line maybe underneath to use this word in a sentence.
Ooh, yeah,
Because
that is
sometimes
hard.
it is, we're buying a little time before they get an assessment and go to that next level. And want to keep them feeling engaged and not left out. But yes, right, use it in a sentence is then the next level. The last thing we want is for a student to just say, this is too easy for me, and sit there not smiling and not making an effort and making progress in their own right. So I love these creative ideas.
Or give feedback by not walking back in the door. You know, 'cause that's the most disheartening to me. It's like teachers want to provide, but if you don't know because you never come back and tell me, I don't know.
Yes, the voting with their feet. John had dropped a question for us in the chat. Does anyone actively support phonetic transcription?
I don't actively support it. I do know students who rely on it. I am thinking back to myself as a language learner, though. Back in college, when I was first learning Arabic, I did the exact same thing when I was learning the alphabet. I would write it in Arabic, and then next to it, I would write how to phonetically translate it in English. And my professor put the fear of God into me. She said, "You will never learn to read if you do it this way, because you won't be internalizing these structures." And honestly, there's a little bit of truth to that. I mean, even if you're reading it, if you read it out loud and you don't have the sounds right, I certainly don't have all the sounds right when I read out loud in Arabic. I'm also very out of practice, but that's another story. But I would say, in my professional opinion, it's better to try and to make a mistake than to be going back and forth between these two alphabets. Also, there's sounds in certain alphabets in certain languages that simply don't exist in English, and vice versa. So not everything transliterates perfectly.
And I know there are strong schools of thought here. And how about, what there was a comment made earlier. It escapes me. I'll close the circle here in a moment. Oh, when talking, Laura had mentioned, or we talk about students voting with their feet, engaging them. Do we, those various learning styles, we can't be everything to everyone, but how often are we explicit and meet them at a graded level where we explain why we're doing this? And do you ever have that conversation with your students when they want to phonetically transcribe? Is that use phonetic transcription, where you want a more of the whole language approach? Do you actively talk about your approaches with your students in a manner they can understand?
Well, I might be a little bit different off of the phonetics. So I teach a level 2, and they do really well, but there's just some syllables within the word that are hard to pronounce, like the OUGH, right? So for them to know that makes like ah, and I might write that sound up there so they know it's but we don't put it in the packet, and not everyone writes it to help them remember how to say that word. But we do explicitly talk about those letters make that sound. Right. It's not, but I don't do it until they've tried and they've made a mistake. Many, like, if we've read it a couple of times, whole group, then I'll wait, because it's not every student. It's just some who will struggle with that, and I'll work with them individually. Or if it's something the whole class does, we'll work whole class. But it's just, that's how I approach that phonetic sound. Heather, you had something to add?
I think so. For phonetic transcription, I teach upper level right now, so like pretty high English speakers. And if my students are struggling with something and they want to write it phonetically on their paper, I will never discourage that. Do I actively encourage it? Probably not, but I'm not going to discourage it because it's, you know, one of the methods for them to remember. I find that most of my students aren't like phonetically writing every single word. It's just the words that they're really confused about that they're going to start writing something so that they have something to fall back on to. Oh yeah, the O-U-G-H sounds like this in this word or whatever. Also, again, we have so many sounds in our language that isn't in their language and vice versa. And so it's really hard sometimes for your students to say, okay, we have a flapped T here, but it sounds like a D, you know, to me. And it just, there's so many different things in English, just like any language, that don't transcribe correctly. So if they can even get close to that sound in their language and recognize that that sound is about what this sound is, I encourage that. As for explaining why I do things, yes, I do try to do that. I don't always remember, but I do try. Currently this week, we've been talking about how I really want the students to go from a conversational level of English to more of an academic level, and what that will take and how we're going to build to get, because they're very high speakers, they can talk to you and I, but conversationally, not necessarily academically. So, right, they need to put more phrasing in, they need to put clauses in, they need more prepositions, they need to make noun. There's so many things that they could do to make their speech better. So that's what we've been talking about the last week.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Heather. I like how you're giving them a picture of, this is where we're at. It's conversational English. This is where I'm helping you to go, which is more academic. And at that high level, we're really able to lead people to that and help them make connections to why that is of value to them. They want to sound intelligent when they're talking with people, and they want to be able to interact more than in those, maybe in their work circle where it's much more informal. Usually when I talk with those higher level learners, they do want to be able to communicate at a more sophisticated level and express pretty complex ideas, and have the skills to do so. Who in this group has heard of or been trained on MALP? The mutually adaptive learning paradigm. Mutually adaptive learning paradigm. So that that technique would bridge back to the question John mentioned earlier about, do we tell them why we're using this approach as a teacher, why we're doing this type of activity. And in the mutually adaptive learning paradigm, it's very cross-culturally adaptive as it honors the preferred learning styles and the learning history of the student while walking them to something that's new. But it blends those approaches. It blends things that they're used to and expect out of education with some more Western styles of learning. And to your question, John, I've been in that position of needing to explain why we are doing it this way and how I'm going to compromise by integrating some culturally relevant approaches to their history. And then telling them this is what we're adding to that here at our local program. And this is why. This is how it's going to help you achieve your goals. I don't know if any other teachers have had that experience of trying to find creative ways to grade language and let them know why we're doing it this way. For example, pair work. If students come from a culture where in formal education, the teacher's a lecturer and you sit and listen and you take notes and you memorize everything. And then we bring them into classrooms that are more Western in nature, where you're doing pair work, you're doing group work, you're talking with your peers, and the teacher's not always the center of instruction, it's student-centered. Have you ever had to explain that? And what are some ways that you did it effectively?
Laura, I think that just a turn of phrase you used a couple minutes ago, I think was really key, where you said to lead them to that conclusion or something. For example, if we want to talk about why we don't just stand at the front and lecture to our students, I can certainly tell them why. And as we all know, adults need to know why we're doing something in order to accept it and to help them to learn. So that's important. But if we can, as you said, lead them to it so that they come to the conclusion themselves, or that they can see the reasoning themselves, that's much more powerful. So if we can get them to say, asking leading questions like, okay, if you listen or you speak, this is just the top of my head. Does practicing English help you speak better? Well, yeah. Okay. And if you're just listening to the teacher, are you practicing? Or is there, what's better for you? What's better for your learning? Only listening or listening and talking? Da, 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 da. And then they kind of can come to that conclusion themselves, and you say, oh, okay. So speaking helps you. Speaking a little or speaking a lot? Which one is better? And step by step, you can say, okay, yeah, so you think that speaking more helps you learn more English and remember more, etc. Therefore, okay, let's make that happen. Whatever. And then they've done it themselves. And I think it just has a much bigger impact on them. And I've done that with anything. Like if I want them to answer their phone outside the classroom and not in, like it's almost like, it's not like tricking them. It's not really, but if you lead them to it, they can come to that conclusion themselves, and it works. Like I've seen it really work well. That's my 2 cents.
Beautifully stated, Amy. It does feel like we're leading the witness, asking leading questions. But that's our job, is to facilitate learning and to guide the students to what's in their best interest and help them see what will benefit them. And at the same time, we're learning from them too. Always, we are a student of our students' own best learning. What works best for them. We have so much variety in our classrooms that we're learning too. But we still have to have a structure to move the whole class forward even as we differentiate and have different types of activities and tap into different learning styles. We can't do them all every day. So we use our teacher wisdom in that. But I think you modeled for us so beautifully how how you would lead students to something that would be in their best interest so that they have buy-in. And I love that you pointed out adults need to know why. That's really important to them, to not just go blindly, but to know what's in it for them as we facilitate their learning. Anyone else have that experience of helping students to find the what's in it for them? Yeah. When they can articulate, yes, it is my goal to speak English fluently, and then you help them identify more speaking practice is one of the ways to do that. That's one example. We have just a few minutes remaining before we close here. Today we have had the opportunity to hear from ELIDP participants, Alec Hudson and Tu Nguyen. And we are so grateful for your efforts in preparing that and being really thoughtful about your own practice. The English Language Instructor Development Program, actually, we have a cohort happening next week here at in Sioux Falls at the LSS Center for New Americans. And this is a training, as many of you know, that is provided to adult education and literacy program staff that will be working with English learners, adult English learners. And it is a 3-day intensive program with both methodologies and best practices, but also classroom mentorship and collaborative lesson planning, and some fantastic guest speakers. So we really look forward to having our group of 5 participants coming next week for the ELIDP, and their capstone project is what you just saw from Alec and Tu, and that is their 5 to 7 minute presentation on action that they put into practice in the classroom setting. So congratulations again to you two for completing your capstone, which now entitles you to apply for your state credential in English language instruction. So congratulations again, you two. Any announcements or anything we need to add?
Kristen made a comment about a DOE event coming up. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Sure. Registration doesn't even open until November. But we have a literacy group here at the DOE that I have been a part of for the past 3 years. And I advocate mostly for the 6th grade and up population, when most of the DOE is focused on youth literacy. And so in my previous role, I also did work-based learning, and crossed over a little bit with DLR in the adult world. So that's why I'm on the panel, and they mentioned their literacy conference is next June. On the website, it specifically says it's for K-12, and I happened to bring up the need for adult literacy and how a good chunk of our GED learners are under the age of 29, and some of them are even under the age of 20, and that you guys as educators could probably use any and all free professional development that might help you. And so they modified their statement and said they will open it up to more than just K-12. But registration isn't open yet. So once it does open, I'll just verify that they've changed that wording on the website. But if anybody is interested, I think it'll be a good PD opportunity. So
Thank you for your advocacy on behalf of the Adult Ed program and for sharing this with us. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone. Enjoy this beautiful autumnal weather. And well done today, gentlemen.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for participating, everybody.
Yep. Have a good day.
Thanks all.
Take care now.